Hey, Good News family. This is Tana Heineman, the host of our Now What podcast. This is where we unpack Sunday's message and we talk about how to practically apply it to our everyday lives. I love that you're here with us, and I love that we get the opportunity to spend more time with our pastors and have them teach us even more what the Word has to say about our everyday lives. We learned from Jesus that one of the best ways to grow is in community together. So join us as we unpack Sunday's message. Hey, Good News family. How are you guys this week? I'm thinking that this is probably the mildest winter I can remember in a lot of years. Have you guys noticed? We haven't had nothing of snow. Do you think it's coming?
You're jinxing it.
No,
I'm just wondering, if you had to put money down, what do you think?
It's like telling a ball player, man, you're hitting really great. You've been hitting every game. Don't. Why?
Well, hey, you realize there's a no-hitter going?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, let me stop right now and say, if I said to our listeners last week that I needed prayer because I was with all the executive team, I need even more prayer this week because, first of all, we're already off the rails talking about sports. Second of all, PJ is out. And Josh is here, and now there is no other adult supervision except for me in this.
So
in this
you're
podcast.
saying that when PJ is here, there is adult supervision?
I mean, a little more than there is right now. So I'm not going to. What?
I'm older than you.
I know, but you don't behave older than me. At least not around these guys.
Maybe you just don't understand it.
Maybe not. But I'm going to say right now, I'm not going to let you start talking about hitting and baseball and sports stats and whatever.
Let's talk about Josh's hat.
Yeah.
I like Josh's hat.
Rodeo in the sky.
I like it too.
Oh, because, I know why you like his hat. Because it references country music.
Oh.
You don't like other types of music.
I like other types of music, but speaking of country music,
racist?
I don't like Beyonce's country music, if you're going to say that.
Dang, she doesn't like Beyonce.
No. Well, this is not what this podcast is about. I was going to compliment you boys today. And actually, I opened the last podcast.
Is about a Johnny Cash song. If there's ghostwriters in the sky, then it would follow that if you kept building that out, there would be a rodeo there too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
what
good.
Josh's hat says.
Okay,
rodeo.
Shout out to Johnny Cash. All right, we'll give you that. No, I was going to say the reason that you guys looked so dapper today is because we had a staff photo shoot, and so we cleaned everybody up. So if you guys usually just listen to the podcast, you might actually want to go to YouTube and watch because they look halfway decent today, is what I was going to say.
Are you saying we're
wow.
ugly other days?
No, I just said,
halfway
I'm just saying to the listeners, you're welcome.
That's a way to give somebody a compliment.
We clean them up.
Listen, you don't look as
Your shirt has
ugly.
buttons on, yeah. You have you have pants on.
But I'm still a child, and button-up shirts I still put on over my head.
Oh my heavens.
So
okay.
It's frustrating putting
It's
the
good,
buttons.
Josh.
Yeah.
it is.
It's just preparing
It's a
for when
waste
you
of
get
time.
old and you won't be able to button again.
Yeah.
You'll have to have somebody help you.
Because he has
Could use
only
one of
thumbs.
Yeah.
Do you guys like being on camera? Did you guys enjoy the photo shoot today? Some of you look like you had a good time.
Well, I always have a good time with the crew, but doesn't matter whether it's a camera or not.
When Calvin Klein called me a few years back, I turned it down just because, as natural as I am in front of a camera,
You did not want to be wearing an underwear.
Yeah, it just wasn't.
In public.
I knew
So
that it wasn't the calling.
Let's talk
that
about the
God had brought on my
podcast
life.
now.
I was the other
The
side
actual-
where I was like, no, they came out with the dad bod line, and I was like, there needs to be some exposure to that. We need to set people free from there.
Oh my goodness, I'm losing control. Did you guys buy something new for the pictures today?
Absolutely not.
Why?
No, me neither. I don't know. Some people were like, do you have what you're going to wear for the pictures? And I'm like, yeah. I don't know. I didn't know if you felt the pressure.
I have a shameful
Did you?
closet. Full
You
of
do.
clothes,
We
yeah.
discussed that closet a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing I'm going to ask you before we jump into the serious stuff is it is February, and have you guys all registered for the Marriage Connect night?
You said February
February.
or February?
No,
I want to know
not
why there's
February.
an extra R.
February. I don't know.
It's
Focus.
Some people said February.
You're not going to get enough time to talk about the things you want to talk about if you keep doing this.
We are talking about
February
That's what I wanna
14th,
talk about.
Valentine's Day, Marriage Connect night.
Yes, I'm registered.
Good.
I do not participate in the promotion and capitalism way to celebrate love. So I'm not participating in that.
Well, you're not participating in Valentine's Day, but you are participating in Marriage Connect tonight. I've seen your name on the schedule. So did you
dang.
get registered?
That means Victoria scheduled you. She registered you.
No, I didn't see you on the registration.
to have a conversation.
No, you're on the
Surprise.
schedule. Okay, listeners, if you are married and you have not registered for the Marriage Connect night, you have until February 5th. which is taken away. So you better get to work. You guys, thank you, Josh, for registering. The rest of you, I'm not really sure what's happening. Okay, let's just jump into this. This week we are on SCAR, restoration. Peter's restoration is what we've been talking about. And we got a lot of positive feedback about the podcast last week and just the way you guys were just engaging in a conversation, and that we just got to kind of feel like we were sitting and listening. Somebody even told me that it just felt like they were listening in on someone's small group, which was great. I just said small group, and the proper word around here is life group.
Life group.
Yep. Beep.
Wow.
Okay, it's life group.
Cell group.
So, home fellowship group. If you've been here long enough, it's been all the names. Okay, so this sermon, really this week, I kind of joked that you stole a lot of what we said on the podcast last week to put into your message, but I was just kidding. But it really does tie in together with what was happening last week with Peter and this week. So I just want to talk about it. One thing, I maybe will kick back a little. You want me to start right there?
Sure.
Okay. It's maybe not a kickback. I'm just still processing in my brain. You defined restore as bringing back or returning to a former condition, place, or position. And you said, but the thing with God's restoration is he doesn't just improve the old thing, he makes the old thing new. Mm-hmm. So then I go, okay, well, yes, I know like 2 Corinthians 5, we're a new creature, whatever. But
Whatever.
I mean, not or whatever.
That's what you said, whatever.
He makes us a new creature.
Or whatever.
A creation, and that's amazing. But my point is not that. My point is also the full use of the word restore, because the Bible is full of the use of restore, and that God does bring things back to their former condition or their former even position. And that's what I heard in your definition. Former position would be the condition we were in, or the position we were in the garden, where you're walking side by side with God, where he's bringing us back to that. So I'm wrestling with how restore means bringing us back, but God's restoration means making new, and I don't know what to do with that in my brain.
Well, the definition that I share, I probably should have shared that is a dictionary definition of the word restore. And so when I say that that God's restoration, a better way to communicate it includes more than just restoring the old thing to the proper or previous state, if you will. So it involves more than that, because you are right. So when God restores, he takes us back to the way things should be, but also makes us so much better. So in my own life, it's like, yeah, he restored me, meaning he transformed me. And it wasn't only the way that I was before my life was a real mess. It was the way that he intended it to be originally. And I had never been there before. Mm-hmm. So it is a new thing. That's in good. that it's not because Rafael, even when I was a kid, right, I was born into sin, right? I was sinful even when I was a kid. And like so many times we have that conversation about, you don't have to teach a kid to lie. They just automatically know that if you ask me and tell me if I did it, I'm going to say no. And if I have somebody else near me that I potentially could pass the blame on to, that's what I'm going to do. So there is the new, right? So like God restored me to that place where he originally wanted me to be, but I couldn't be because I have not accepted the sacrifice of Jesus. So now all of that is new.
That's good.
So the best way that I can describe that is a both and.
Yep. That's really good. I like that, because it is a new experience for us. It's a new position to us, because we've never gotten to be where we were supposed to be in the first place.
Right, exactly.
I like it. You guys got anything? He was smart for a second. It was really good.
Wow.
See, that's...
Sheesh.
Okay, forgiving challenge. Scars.
There's a name for that.
Stop.
Where you compliment but dig at the same time.
Yeah, I think it is. We're not going to go there today.
Okay, SCARS. Forgiving Challenge has been the acronym SCARS, and for the whole series. And I really like thinking about it with restoration, because I think you and I, PR, we talked about it, and I think it's in our book. I lose track of where we've had conversations and where we've read things, but where God restored Jesus to his rightful place of authority on earth and in heaven after the resurrection, but he left his scars on his hands and on him. And Jesus could have had a perfected body with no scars, but the scars help us remember.
Yeah.
And I got this picture of even Jesus looking at his own scars and what he remembers when he looks at them. And, and that may be too fruity. Maybe that's not, real or biblical, or I don't know. But in my simple-mindedness of just looking at him, thinking he's remembering us when he thinks about what he did for us, and that we have our own scars. And he talks about in the book that scars have stories. They tell stories. Right. And I'm wondering if you guys, when we're talking about restoration, PR, you went there on Sunday with sharing a bit about Victoria and her story of restoration. But I wonder if you guys would share some scar stories. It can be physical scars and, kind of funny or serious or whatever, but it can also be spiritual scars. And if you could I think, make it a safe, real place for people to think about their restoration stories in light of your guys' stories.
Yeah. So I want to give the listeners or viewers a picture of restoration. So in restoring a home, for example, which I said it on Sunday, if you want an open floor plan,
Mm-hmm.
you need to knock down some walls.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you knock down some walls, there's going to be a mess. There's going to be labor associated with it. There's a work that happens. And so I want us to think about restoration in a place that it's not always nice and prim and proper. And because in our mind, sometimes we think that coming to Jesus, things become just so beautiful and great, and there's no pain. And that could be true. But just like I said, when it comes to the restoration, the newness, and the restoring the old, in the process of restoration, there's also that component of a messiness.
Yeah.
And there's also the component of the pain associated with change. And so when it comes to my life being restored, for example, I want to say that probably one of those things that in my restoration that I had to grieve and at times feel the pain of was relationships.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So people that were close to me, that were dear to me, they did not understand what God is doing in my life. They seen it as a phase. They seen it as something that I will come out of. And as you know me, I was very vocal, and at the same time, I did not know how to handle the fact that they did not know how to deal with me now, but I did not know how to deal with them either. And so there was pain, there was rejection, and those things caused myself and those people that were close to me at the time pain. And so in that, I'm talking about specifically things that I was doing that I knew were not honoring God, but I knew that God was asking me to stay away from those things now. And so when it comes to real restoration, there were things that I had to do. God was doing something internally, right? And it's like God is saying, okay, you see this wall, Rafael? We need to open this up because I want all of this light that is hitting this room to affect the entire space. But that light cannot go to the next room because this wall is here. So here's the hammer. Or here's the sledgehammer, right? And then Rafael has to make a decision. Am I going to knock down that wall? There are people here and everybody's going to get dust on them. But I have to make that choice. So I want us to understand that there are things that we now must do because of what God is doing internally. And I hope I'm making sense here, but there's the being doers of the word, not hearers only component that really became real for me. So I realized that, so you mean that getting drunk every day, it's not what I'm supposed to be going and sleeping around. It's not what I'm supposed to be doing. Going to clubs every night is not what I'm supposed to be doing. Like those are the things that I identify with that were me. And when God says, hey, when he called me a different name, he says, you're my son now. And as part of the family, you don't do that. But now the ball was on my court, if you will. I mean, he does give me the strength and the ability to say no to things when the Spirit of God is in you, but it's tough. And so that's what community becomes really, really important. That, I mean, and we're not there yet, but I think that there's that component of even Peter saying, I'm going fishing, and some of the other guys says, we're coming with you. Because that's what community does. It's like, depending on who you're with, that has a real influence of where you're going to be going.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but
No, that's really good. Awesome.
Yeah. Whenever you were talking about scars and in restoration, I know in first service, Kristen and I were standing on the front row, and you were like, "Oh, you really know about this," because that's a big part of what my wife does. For anybody who doesn't know, and in that, I've learned a lot about it. And something that I love to see is that we'll take like an old piece of furniture. This doesn't happen often. We're not like experts in this or anything like that, but you'll see an old piece of furniture that's all kinds of beat up and wood furniture. And part of the process of restoring that is taking away what used to be. So if you're wanting to change the stain color, you have to first sand that entire thing down. And sometimes there's this coating over the top of it that is like the sealer of that color of stain. And I feel like, oh man, even as I'm talking, I feel like a lot of times it's not just that the color needs to change in our lives, but that we also have to remove that barrier that we've placed over ourselves, that wall of protection or whatever we want to call it, that hardness over the top of us, that God is like, no, you got to remove that, and then we'll start to change the color. We'll start to sand the other part away. But then there's this cool thing where I actually pulled up my phone, sorry if you guys saw that, and I looked up the definition of patina, because I was trying to relate it, and I don't know that it necessarily will, but in some type of restorations, to see or to capture the wear of something or the scars of something is really cool to see. You'll see that with old cars, where they will take it and they'll actually clean it up, but then they'll clear coat the car so that you have this old look where it has that oxidized look to it. And it's to say, hey, yes, this is an old car. We've kept it the way that nature has basically brought it to be. Now with wood, you'll have dings and cuts and things like that. And the thing that I like about it is that it tells a story. You know what I mean? Like, I think we all probably have something, a wall that has a ding in it or a piece of furniture that's kind of messed up. And every time we look at it, it might be in frustration. We think about like when we were moving in and our friend really crazily knocked the couch into the wall and put this scuff, or our kid ripped the leather sofa that we saved our entire lives to be able to finally buy.
That hasn't happened.
No, of course not. But it tells a story no matter what. And I feel like our lives are like that as well. I have scars all over my hands from all kinds of different things. And I can point at different scars and tell you the story that is behind those scars. Now, I'm able to use my hands still for what God has gifted me with. Those scars don't take away from my ability to play the guitar. And actually, none of them are from playing the guitar. But I love that. Calluses. Except for the calluses, I love that our scars help tell the story of like what you're talking about. There's so much that I feel like we can unpack in that. But the restoration, PR, what you said was so powerful. That restoration is a point that we never have even been able to step into before. And that's God's heart for us, that we're able to walk alongside him in original condition of what he wanted for us.
I have mine that I want to say in a minute, but I have a question for you. We are friends, but we're becoming friends at the same time. So it's actually a illustration of what I'm saying. I think sometimes in theology, for me anyway, it feels like they're trying to say something happens all or nothing. So you're restored, and this is the qualification, or you're sanctified, which is that next week?
Yes, next week.
And that's an event, and it just happens. And when you think about it, it's self-evidently incorrect.
Right.
That's just not how anything functions. So you have certainly the moment, but it'd be like, oh, baby was conceived, therefore it's grown and died. That it's silly. Restoration doesn't. It begins at some point where we allow it to start happening, but then it's progressive. My question for you, Josh, is having grown up in church and then knowing some of your story without. How do you and have you dealt with what I'm making kind of an assumption, but some of your scars may be feeling like they're self-caused. You see what I'm saying? So there is things I've done. There's things that happen to me, which some of what I'm going to talk about. But there's like guilt that is guilt that doesn't necessarily need to be. I mean, it becomes a I need counseling kind of mess, which I don't mean as a shameful thing. I just mean, but how do you, in light of this conversation and dealing with scars, kind of accept your own choices, but taking the hard step, what I really think is a hard step, to even bring those to God? Does that make, am I being clear?
Yeah, I think so. I know for me, like I have those similar things of things that happened to me in my childhood, in a Christian home that were not ever intentional or whatever. You know, I love my parents. It's nothing like that. But things that happened to me as a kid that I carried for a long time. I don't mean this in a trigger word type of thing, but I whenever you initially said that, I almost said all of my scars are self-inflicted, is what my response was going to be. I understand that's not really quite what we're talking about, but I don't play the victim in what my life has looked like. I made choices, even in spite of what happened to me. I made choices to move in a direction that caused scars. Because of things that happened to me. But I made the choices to go that way. So, I would say most of my scars, 97% of my scars are self-inflicted in
but
that sense.
There's narratives going around for people that if you're a man, you take responsibility, but if I'm taking responsibility, then I don't probably need God either.
Absolutely.
So anyway.
And I did that for a long time, where I thought, like, this was my thing. I should have to carry the weight of the shame or the guilt that came with these things. And there's a natural part of that. I don't know how open we're supposed to be here. I did not walk into marriage a virgin. My wife did. Having to have that conversation of scars from relationships that I had before was a very difficult, real life thing that I had to have conversation with her about. That was not fun. Like, God had forgiven me, you know, but I also had to ask my wife to forgive me for things that I had done beforehand. That was like a practical, real life situation of having to ask for forgiveness for something that I had done that Jesus had already forgiven me for. Those type of things. But that was mine to carry. God forgave me. I didn't have to walk in the shame and guilt from God, and neither from my wife. She forgave me. She's gracious. She's incredible. But I still had to have that conversation that I initially felt shame of. And I'm not proud of that. Even still. But
so you can be not
for
proud
12 years.
And also
and not
take on the separation version of shame.
Right, exactly. I think that's like a huge thing that we miss a lot of times. Like, I'm not proud of anything that I did in my previous way of living by any means. But like, I'm also not going to walk it out as if that is still hanging over my head. I don't care who you are. You want to ask me about it? I'll tell you whatever I feel like you're justified to know about in my life. But at the same time, like, I know who I am in Christ. I was going to bring it up. It's been, I don't know, probably 6 months ago. We were in a podcast, me and PR and Tana, and I said something about being a low life. And PR goes, hey, don't say that. That's not true. And that was like one of those moments of a scar of who I used to be,
Yes.
like kind of bubbled up in my verbiage of what I thought about myself.
Yes.
And as my friend, PR was like, hey, that's not true. That's not who you are today.
Yeah.
You know, you're a man of God. Like,
Yeah.
that's not right. And it was like a wake up call of like, man, am I doing this in other areas of my life also? And maybe I have spotted a few other ones, but as friends, like, I've been able to see other things in my life and been able to help other friends point those things out of like, hey, you don't have to walk in that anymore. That's not who you are today. So
Yeah.
it kind of took a
Man,
long
there's so
time to
much.
answer
No,
that.
that's what I was hoping for. So much. My physical one is nice and easy, but I think it's a good illustration among them. I'm similar, a lot of them. My last jump in the Army, came out of the plane, and by the time I was getting to the ground, I was swinging, and it's not a long story, but more for this. And when I landed, I landed on nothing but my right hip. So and you hit hard every time. And so it was a bruise from about my side all the way down my leg and everything else. And when weather changes, I get to know that. Just 30 years of reminding of like, oh yeah, there it is. Back is affected, and but I also am like, no, that's a great story. I mean,
you get reminded that you used to jump out of airplanes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
take that.
But my point is that I would feel it less if I was working out more regularly and things like that. But there are things that just stay. We sometimes from a pulpit, it's easy to imply that, oh, God restores and you're brand new. Yeah, but I still limp or whatever it is. And the restoration, I think, is, like you said, a both and. I think there are things that, for whatever reason, just an utter clean slate, and other things that you're going to work through, and you do work through, whether it's self-caused or outside caused or whatever it is. And sometimes it's sometimes dealing with that scar, those things that have damaged and scarred. Sometimes even that conversation is, should I take responsibility for this? What role did I have it? For me as a teenager, just was a foster kid and stuff like that. And so my still struggle with, do I belong? And does anybody want me? And it's an overly simplified version of it, but just go with that. So me coming to Christ, my salvation, the thing that I heard from God, which I think I've said here before, at least in the church, is I felt wanted. For the first time in my life, without reservation, without anything. There was no theology involved in it, no intellectualization. It was simply a sense that God wanted me. That some reason I existed, which for me gives meaning. And that's all I was asking for. I can hang. That's from my past too. Can you hang? To do some of the stuff is, yeah, let's go. You got to hang. You got to carry your own stuff. And I don't know that could be taken too far. But anyway, that's a separate thing. But to have that sense of being wanted, say, okay, let's do this. It did not solve the challenges with family, with how I perceive family. To this day, my foster parents are dead. Mom has passed away, but I'm still trying to accept that they genuinely love me, because I don't know how to interpret that. And I have dealt with it intellectually and things like that, which is successful and not. Anyway, where we're going with the restoration is that for me, this is a long-term, ongoing process. 20 years ago, I genuinely didn't know that it was a problem, that it was let me find a different word than problem. So I said I struggle with accepting that I'm a part of the family, that I am a part of, that even though I call him dad, that there's just something there, and it's not on his end. There's scars in me that want to keep that space. Mm-hmm. I now understand, or I'm trying to understand, let me be really honest, that closeness is healthier. Mm-hmm. There's no you need to, there's no shame involved, even though I do interpret it that way. I don't owe anybody anything, again, though I interpret it. But me working through this is an opportunity to truly connect even more with and accept that there's a family that also wanted me. Mm-hmm. And that is, to me, only possible at this stage in my life, and I'm not there yet. Mm-hmm. So I really want to push hard against that. This one event fixes everything. Mm-hmm. This one event is a step into, among things, step into wisdom, where we can begin to get instruction, where we begin to pay attention, where we can begin to offer kindness and receive kindness. And so many, infinite other things. And in that, we become whole. Mm-hmm. To the amount that we're able within the time frame God gives us. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
You saying that in the same picture that I was trying to paint earlier about restoring a piece of wood furniture, I feel like that process, that element of, like I was talking about the clear coat, that's part of the process.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a table, the top part of the table is the easiest part to get mm-hmm. done. Mm-hmm. The intricate knobs in the legs mm-hmm. and things like that, mm-hmm. that takes a lot of time and intentionality.
Yeah.
I feel like that is a big part of our walk in restoration. Mm-hmm. In our walk with God is, man, there's still a ton of things. I feel like I've grown exponentially mm-hmm. in my life and in my walk with God. Mm-hmm. But I know that now the things that God is working on, the things that I'm in process of restoration with, mm-hmm. are the small, really difficult parts of my walk with God.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, it's
mm-hmm.
my thoughts towards the really bad driver that pulled out in front of me mm-hmm. going 20 miles an hour slower than me.
So the something that Pastor Greg said, I don't want it to go unnoticed, and I feel led to speak to our listeners, to those watching, when it comes to this thought or this feeling of not being wanted, mm-hmm. not belonging. Because I know you're not the only one. I know that perhaps there are many people listening, watching, and some of our Good News family feeling, I'm not wanted. Mm-hmm. Nobody has ever wanted me. And you said that and you didn't word it this way, obviously, but what seemed attractive to you mm-hmm. about Jesus was that here's someone who wants me. Mm-hmm. who has chosen you. Mm-hmm. But yet you, through all these years, have tried to reconcile the fact that there were some foster parents that wanted you, mm-hmm. that raised you. Mm-hmm. And you're like, there's something there that is inside of me, right? Mm-hmm. That you've been dealing with and trying to move forward. So I want our listeners to hear and to know that piece of truth that you share, mm-hmm. that Jesus wants you mm-hmm. and that he chose you. Mm-hmm. He was the one that took the first step. It's like, as a guy, the guy is always the one that proposes, right? At least in our culture. It's like you're the one that goes out and says, hey, will you marry me? That's what God did in sending his son. He was the one that made the proposal and said, hey, I want you. Will you have me? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something so, so powerful in a culture that says you have to be this way, look this way, or have this thing in order to be accepted and in order to be valued. Yeah. And God essentially said, before you were, before you did, before you had, I wanted you. Mm-hmm. So I don't want that to be missed, because that is golden, mm-hmm. because that's what God did. And I remember having this conversation with you, because mm-hmm. like being having a father to me is such a huge thing. And we had this conversation about the views that we have because we have different upbringing. And at me telling you, like, bro, but your foster parents chose you. Like, my parents didn't have a choice. Like, I came out and I was their kid. But it was like, no, we want this one. Like, we want him. We want to give him our name and we want him to grow up with us. And I'm like, but that's essentially what God did for us. So I just don't want people to miss that. And so if you're struggling in your life with being accepted or belonging, just know that that's what God did through Jesus.
Yeah, I agree. There's this, for me, it's connected. Story of Hagar.
Good story.
When she is just out in the desert, one of the times, I want to say the second time, and had basically been run out. And it was first. Doesn't matter. Anyway, at some point, in English it reads as an angel, and it is an angel. It's a messenger from God. Meets her and basically, hey, what you doing? I mean, that's my version of it. You got the Rafael version.
The RSV.
Yeah. And through that, the angel gives her direction and things like that. And it's a really, really great story to unpack, which isn't for now. But the end of I think sometimes the way, among the ways to interpret a story is how does the main, or at least in that story, the character respond to whatever's been said. Read Job that way, by the way. And in this case, Hagar ends with calling the place she's at El Rohi Roha. And it was, the explanation she gave is, because I have seen the God who sees me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just that he saw where she was. No one knew where she was. God did. But it wasn't just that. It's that he attended to her in this, and just that intentionality, that stepping into it, it changed how she referred to God. You see her switch from a generalized kind of God to a Yahweh God, and it's just an incredible thing. And so as we're dealing with these things, this idea that God does see, and trying to be open to hearing wherever we're at, even if it feels like just a dry desert. There's no way you can make it.
Good.
I don't exactly know where to go, but I've just been thinking as you guys have been talking of even with scars that there's some scars, especially like men in our culture, it's like cool and everybody wants a cool scar to show off or whatever. And then there's the scars that you're maybe not as okay with, but women especially, there's a shaming about scars, and and so we tend to hide and feel less than if we have scars. And just thinking about even Hagar, for her, her body is different now because she's given birth to Ishmael, and so she's not even, she's physically, air quotes, scarred. She looks different now. Yeah. And just that recognition of when you have a moment with God where he shows you those hard places in your life and reminds you that he saw you and he was with you through them, then as you move forward in life and you notice the scar, you catch a glimpse of the scar in the mirror, you realize, I hate that scar. However, Jesus met me in that scar, and there's a remembrance that shifts then, and you're less and less, I hate it, and you're more and more, yeah, but God met me. Yeah, but God saw me. Yeah, but God, fill in the blank of what he did. And just even looking of recognizing those areas in our life where sometimes we are ashamed, and really wanting us to get away from shame, because when we're doing that, we're stealing God's story from him. Because I'm shamed, I don't want you to see the scars. I don't want you to know my story. But that's because you're thinking that your story is about you.
Yeah.
But my story isn't about me. My story is about humanity that was fallen and born into sin, and God came and rescued every single one of us. So when I tell my story, it's not about I'm such a failure or all the shame. It's, but God is amazing and saved, redeemed, restored, continues to, like you said, it's this, it often gets messier before it gets better. When you've knocked down a wall, and you put up a new wall, the drywall, the dust is just, it's everywhere you see it. But you also have evidence of like, yeah, but that's like a remodel job happening. That's restoration happening. And that can be exciting. And just to shake off shame so that we recognize it is, what God has done is to be celebrated and what he's continuing to do. And also remembering that we're not on a timeline. We tend to get ourselves on a timeline of, but the restoration should be done by now.
Yeah.
I should have arrived by now. Well, look at him. He's like, what, and I know with you, I got time. We're good. God's still
Plenty of
patiently
time.
working with you.
She's saying you're almost done.
No, I think she said I still look at my age and I still got a lot of work to be done in me. That's how I picked it up. But I read between the lines.
But we do tend to do a comparison thing of like, how come this person is that far and how come my life still looks like this, or how come I still think this way? Or,
so to that point, if we go back to the house analogy, like on the outside, the house looks fantastic.
Right.
You have no idea what kind of remodeling
Right.
is going on the inside.
Right.
It could be nothing. Everything could be a huge mess. And, where I live, there are neighborhoods being built up and the house looks done on the outside.
Yeah.
And when you drive and you actually look through the front door, there's nothing but studs. Like there's no walls or nothing inside.
Yeah.
There's no flooring. It's just a shell. So could you be dealing with that? And you look at somebody and you compare yourself to that person,
Absolutely.
not knowing that just all you see is the outside, and God is totally
Gutting the inside.
gutting the inside and
Yeah.
doing a total gut job, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's really important.
For me, the house you're talking about, and just by using the word house, I'm answering the question, but why go through all that? Why? It's an easy answer.
Yeah.
Why? Why go through all the mess of,
Oh, because it makes
All
it
kinds
better.
of- yeah, I was
There's
gonna
so much.
say, it's better.
The transformation makes it more
Your living
usable.
conditions.
Your living conditions are different. Maybe
Functional.
functional.
Yeah.
yes, all of that. You actually have vision.
Yeah.
And a mission and meaning. So you're going to go through. Look, especially if you're doing it, you're going to get your hands messed up. You're going to get dirty. You're going to have to go back when you don't want to. Even if it's your job,
Yeah.
you don't want to be it because things might hurt. Things might be great. You don't want to be there. You do want to be it. Whatever it is. But this is the process of accomplishment that isn't magical. It is through process. It's through effort and through work. And if you're looking for on a house illustration, well, where's God involved? That you had the idea, that you might have the money to do it. I mean,
resources.
It is He.
Yeah,
It's Him who gives us the power to get wealth. And so I'm not trying to do a preach or any of that, but this process has to, in my opinion, become gritty and spiritual and earthy at the exact same time. Which, man, I'm on a. Adam's a dirt man. That's really his name. That there's this combo of the God and us, and doing this together. We are restored together. He partners with us to get better. As that maturity continues to happen, there is actually the use of the things that were terrorizing me as the ability to give as a gift to you.
Yeah.
That I've been where you're at, or at least I'm there, and if nothing else, I'm going to be the guy who comes up and you're able to lean on as you're still limping and able to go. You're going to get better, but you can lean and I understand your pain. Yeah.
That's good.
Our
No,
small-
I'm just going to say that. So something that there's one thing that Pastor Greg just shared. He said, why would you go through the trouble? Why would you do the restoration in a home? And so back to Peter. Why? Because there's a purpose.
Yes.
And there's a mission. There's a destiny. So God had a purpose for Peter. So why go and what you're talking about a house? There's a purpose. So if I am trying to, because now for some people that perhaps got a new dog, and now you had carpet in the house, and the dog is running rampant in the yard, and there's sweat and maybe snow or whatever. You don't want that on the carpet. And so why would you change your flooring in your main floor? Because it's just, there's a purpose for it. And the purpose is we can't have smelly, wet, dirty carpet because everybody's going to get sick and the whole family suffers from allergies. So that's the purpose. So I'm thinking, why transformation? Why restoration? Because there's a purpose. God, we may not be intentional. We may not be in the finer details. Listen, if you're like me, you miss the finer details a lot of times. And I have people in my life that remind me of those things. But God doesn't miss them. He's like, hey, Rafael, I'm going to do this little thing right here. I'm changing a light switch inside of you. And you may not even notice it. But one day you're going to be like, oh, I have a dimmer. It dims the lights. I never even noticed that. Look at how awesome that is. And actually, it may not even be me who recognizes that God changed the light switch to make the lights dim. It may be somebody else. Maybe Tana who says, man, like, look at you. Paying attention to people's feelings. That's a different you. Look at me now.
Yeah.
The lights are dim.
And the
That's
younger
nice.
you would never even understood the
Absolutely.
instruction.
No.
It took you coming to these places to get to the point that you were even open to understanding that there was any instruction you could get because you didn't have the ability, you didn't know the colors existed, so you can't paint with them.
Well, that before, talking about instruction, before in my life, even as a follower of Jesus, instructions were an opportunity for me to rebel. I mean, you give an instruction and it's like, well, you don't know who you're dealing with because you just gave me the opportunity to cause a rebellion here. And the more you walk with the Lord, the more we become like Jesus. Is this series and whatever topic we discuss, our heart and my heart is for us to become more and more like Jesus. And the older I get, the more information I receive, the more difficult it becomes. And so, like you're saying, before it's just like, you giving me instruction? Well, look out. I do whatever I want. Right. And the older you get, it's like you realize some things. And it's like, kind of like Peter.
I was just going to say, that was Peter. And then by the time he's back with Jesus, he's jumped in the water, he's swam back, he's having a conversation. He's like, you, Jesus, know all things. And Jesus is so kind, because I would have been like, you don't say. Like, I know all things. I could have told you that. But you threw all your brothers under the bus. You were so arrogant, whatever. But then recognizing that Jesus, it was worth it as he matured. That he was
absolutely.
Right. What were you going to say?
In our small life group,
because you were going to say small group. Small life group, that it's not that small.
Your fellowship cell.
Exactly. We were talking about a few of the differences between like in this story, and initially we started talking about how Peter and Judas in some respect do the same thing. They both betray Jesus, and you could argue Judas, he's like, man, I took the bullet for this, somebody had to do it. Anyway, that's not the point. But they both betray Jesus. But Peter, in his story, I feel like you see all these mess ups and him trying to figure things out. And then he gets to this point, he denies Jesus. Where Judas, on the other hand, kind of flies under the radar in a lot of ways. You don't really know what's going on with him. And then he betrays Jesus for something that you'd be like, what? Like, for silver? That's really what you're selling this guy out for? Kind of a deal. But then the way that they walk out of their situations, I felt like was a really interesting parallel between the shame and guilt element of things. And Judas, we see, and he goes to an extreme of the shame and the guilt, or the shame has taken over. He can't possibly go any further. He has to,
End his life.
Can't be restored.
I can't remember how they say it now on social medias, but whereas Peter does not do that, but his extreme goes to the opposite side of like once he's restored in Jesus, he goes to this extreme boldness, there, and walks out his life in this crazy way. And so we're talking about those two different things of how, like, man, whenever we go to Jesus, the sin can be the same as somebody else, but whenever we go, his heart for us, his dream for us, or whatever, is to go out built up from what we have gone through or done or whatever it might be, and to be empowered to do more, to share the story of our lives for his glory, not to go the other way where it overwhelms us. And not to say that we are to do what he did, but I'm trying to be careful with my words.
You're great.
But also, to me, a lot of times that's people walking away from church.
Yeah.
I've sinned too much. Like, clearly I'm not good enough, so I'm going to go. Yeah. Peter didn't feel like he was good enough. He went back to his old job. And Jesus, I thought that was interesting, how Jesus calls him Simon again. It almost was like, well, if you're gonna live this way, then I might as well call you the name that you're kind of living out. Or do you want to be Peter?
But the thing in what you're saying, Josh, is this: so if we compare Judas and Simon Peter, they both denied Jesus. They both betrayed him. It is what you do after the betrayal that matters, and they both went back perhaps to their previous life. Like, it's like they're not with Jesus anymore. But when Jesus comes knocking again, and that is the component that you said, like, there are people like that, like Peter, that leave the church, leave the faith. But at some point, Jesus is going to come back to the shores of your life and have a fire ready and say, come and sit with me. I have some questions and I'd like to talk to you. What will you do then? Because to me, that is the point. When he comes back and says, Rafael, do you love me?
Yeah.
And perhaps that question is very intimidating for some. And it's like, I don't love Jesus. And if that's where you are, you're totally fine saying, I don't really love you. I don't know how I feel about you.
Yeah.
He is big enough to take that, to understand it, and to say, okay, sit here and let's be honest with each other. Because I feel like that's what makes a difference. The people that I've seen walk away from Jesus and come back and continue that restoration process are on the other side moving towards sanctification, which we're going to be discussing next week. But as Pastor Greg said, it's not a one-time event.
Right.
It's not linear. So even as people perhaps have walked away from the church, have walked away from Jesus, doesn't mean he's done restoring you. Because as you're away from him, there are things that are happening in your life that God is saying, okay, you do you. You do however you feel it's going to work. And there's restoration happening in the sense that God is still doing things behind the scenes. And when you come back, that what matters is what do you do when Jesus comes back, knocking or asking you, do you love me? Hypothetically, because he may be asking you some other questions instead of that. But anyway, I think that's good.
We're like way long on time. You guys are long-winded.
And we have not touched on anything that you have on your...
Well, I was going to say there was one thing that you specifically kind of wanted to hit on. I do know that a big piece of this you've mentioned already and is Peter's identity and how he sees himself. And I think that identity will very much tie in next week with sanctification, because it is all a process. Like, you can sit here and tell me that I'm restored, or tell me that Jesus died for me, or tell me that blah, blah, blah. You can tell me all these verses. And even like in the Forgiving Challenge, when you talked about, there's these verses of like, go and read who God says you are.
Yes.
I can read those and say, that's nice for Josh, but that's not me, or I don't believe that about myself, or whatever. So there is something that has to happen in the restoration and what we'll get to with sanctification process that happens, that shifts the way I read this, so that I am able to even begin to dip my toe in the water of believing he really means this.
So I want to say something. Do you have the verses here?
Yeah, they're right there.
So for the sake of time, perhaps you say what the verses are so the listeners could be maybe jogging those down, those that may not have the challenge, the Forgiving Challenge, or even put it in the show notes for people to actually go and find out, because this is what at least what I learned in my own life. There are things in the Word of God that I wasn't living out. And when I read them, they became more of a challenge, or they really cut me deep because I'm like, man, I'm not there yet. So one of those things, as I said before, whenever I used to read the fruits of the Spirit, it left me more frustrated than encouraged, because I see the fruit of the Spirit is patience, self-control. I'm like, I don't have none of these. Like, loving people is hard. And so, but then what do you do with that?
Yeah.
You pray and you ask, Lord, help me to become more like Jesus. It's going to be painful. These verses don't become part of who you are until you actually partner with the Spirit of God living in you and asking the Lord, help me to see myself how you see me. It's a relationship, guys. Like, if we don't talk, if we're not in each other's lives, and if we're not having dialogue, like, our relationship is not going to grow. So I want to say that part of this is that relational component, as God is wanting to restore us, to restore our lives. And when I say that, I mean emotionally, spiritually, physically. As he's doing that, we must talk to him about these things. And that's what I'm saying, being totally honest. So if you feel like I just shared that about Victoria. Victoria did not understand how we can call God a father, because her picture of a father, which you and I have had this conversation, was not good. So how can he be a father when my experience on the earthly father is not good? So he cannot possibly be a father and be good. But if that's where you're at, then you come and say, God, I do not see you as a father. I'm having a really hard time seeing you as a father and understanding that you are good, because my experience with the Father is not good. So help me. I need your help.
And you recognize that as you go down that path, among the way I process things, most people don't, it's fine, but you'll understand what I'm saying, is among the things necessary to get there is a reorientation of where the definition is coming from. So when it's, that example is great, and really good Father's Day message, by the way, is if I'm trying to define God on the basis of what I understand this word father to be, the ideal is we switch that. My dad, my father here, me as a father, is good insofar as it reflects the God, the Father. Bad or not good insofar as it doesn't reflect. And it changing the source of the definition of the idea is vital there. I was going to say that, as we're talking about, and I know we're over time, but everyone just needs to hear me talk. But I think all of these concepts, even though these are words we don't often use, but these are theological concepts that get super complicated and everything else, I get frustrated with them, not with people that are trying to understand them. Love that. But when they're they become so convoluted, they're clearly not talking about God anymore. I think these are simple. We are desperately complicated because and so trying to get a simple idea across sometimes needs a metaphor. The one I'll use right now is, let's imagine you were like, oh, I need to fix my finances. Let's imagine you've got $40,000 in credit card debt and a payday loan or something like that. And you've got a house and a car. Okay, let's imagine that. And this will be short. I'm sorry, Tana, but it's brilliant. So it's so worth it. The first thing is, oh, I actually need help.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is the salvation moment where you find somebody who's going to actually help. And you go, oh, then they're going to give me $100,000 and going to fix it. And the person's like, why would I give you $100,000? You have no idea what to do with money. Let's walk you through the process of actually fixing this, because what you need is a whole different point of view on money. And so they walk you through the first step of getting out of the payday loan, because that's the most dangerous. Then we're going to walk you through getting out of the credit card debt. And we're going to convince you, unless you know you have control of this, never get a credit card again. Right. You have to kind of be super honest with yourself. And This is This is a process of restoration that is side by side with sanctification because someone is walking you through it. This sounds remarkably like discipleship. And while there's a bunch of elements involved, and it's easier to talk about than actually work, you still can understand what I'm saying. So sanctification then brings you to let's imagine you get to the place that you are now out of the really dangerous debt. And you're able to have a really intelligent conversation with somebody. You go, I have to pay off my house. And they go, whoa, maybe, but maybe not. But now you're able to begin to have these conversations about the refining of your financial plan. And so it's just a metaphor. It doesn't hit on every single possible spiritual thing. But understand, I really want you to understand that this isn't as complicated as sometimes it can feel. It does get overwhelming to experience and live through from time to time. That's natural, and we're with you. But understand, it's you growing, it's you processing, and while things are going on, things sometimes go sideways, and you have to deal with those too, and it's all okay. It's all part of being humans as we walk through this. So we still, though, get to trust in God who's leading us.
Are we like way over time?
Yeah, we're way over time.
Okay, all right, whatever.
We have work. We have jobs. We have to get back to work. You know, these people who are listening, they got to get back to their lives before
They're just driving to work right now.
Maybe so.
No, there's already taken to and from.
Yeah. Picked up the kids and all the things. Okay, so we will get these verses that PR is talking about from the Forgiving Challenge. We'll get those in the show notes this week for you. This has been a great discussion, and there's just so much more that could be said. Obviously, that I'm like, oh gosh, we're just so out of time. But come back next week, and we will be wrapping up the Forgiving Challenge. Holy smokes. We'll be on the last one, which is sanctification. So thank you guys for being here, and we'll chat again next time.
Thanks again for joining us today. We would love for you to tell others about the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to it too, because this will help others find out about it. If you missed it before, we love to hear from you. So if you have any stories to tell about how the message impacted you, or maybe you have a question or comment, make sure you email us at podcast@goodnews.church. Y'all, this is my favorite day of the week. So go give away what you just learned, and we'll chat again next time.